Hello.
Hello. I'm glad to welcome you to our practice on Sunday morning. I'd like to just give a short introduction to our members who are here. To say that Ajahn is someone who I've enjoyed learning from through his writings, and this is our first opportunity to have him visit our monastery virtually. Ajahn Amaro is a Theravadan Buddhist monk, teacher, and abbot of the Amaravasti Buddhist monastery in southeast England. He's also the co-founder of Abidings Monastery in Northern California. Amaravasti is inspired by the Thai forest tradition and the teachings of the late Ajahn Chah. Its chief priorities are the practice and teachings of Buddhist ethics together with traditional concentration and insight meditation techniques as an effective way of dissolving suffering. So we're very happy to welcome you here to Missouri. Yesterday we had English weather. Our weather turned from very warm to suddenly very cold and rainy. So today is a little bit brighter. So we want to thank you for joining us. So we're very interested to hear your teachings this morning. Welcome.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Don Yeye. And also I could say that the weather is being not very English today, being bright and clear and sunny and warm. So we're enjoying a moment of delight on the weather front today. It's afternoon here in southern England, about 20 past 4. So your morning is my afternoon. So I will begin by reciting the Namo Tassa. It's our traditional way of beginning a Dharma teaching. And so I invite you to put your hands together and also to reflect on the opportunity to hear Dhamma teachings and to take this opportunity to rejoice in the presence of the Buddha's word. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. First of all, I want to just check that people can hear me okay. Is my voice clear enough through your various systems? Okay, thumbs up all around, very good. So this, the theme today, the subject of equanimity in the Niramisa Sutta. I thought that's a pretty specific topic that is being requested. I thought there must be some particular interest in this, or this community at the MABA has been studying this. I don't pretend to be an expert on this field or this particular sutta, but I thought I would be very happy to offer some reflections of what's come to mind in looking through the sutta and present my own perspective on these teachings, this area of Dharma practice. And then there's time for questions and responses after my talk. So hopefully there are things that I've missed out or things that don't quite match with your understanding, or things that do match with your understanding, then we can explore those and follow up any loose threads or things that are unclear in the latter part. So my understanding is that we have about an hour and 20 minutes or so, give or take. Very good. So I'll try to speak for about 40 or 50 minutes and then leave plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. So the Niramisa Sutta, again, I'm not sure how much you all have been studying this in recent times, but it's one of the analytical teachings of the Buddha. It's not very anecdotal. There's not a lot of background story or particular incidents. It just talks about a particular area of experience and practice, and there's not a lot of context for that, exactly why the Buddha spoke in this way at this time, and exactly to whom he was speaking. In the sutta itself, it just says, bhikkhus, there is carnal rapture, there is spiritual rapture, and there is rapture more spiritual than spiritual. So where the teaching was given, or what the inspiration for it is not named. But I feel that this is a significant area to look at, because in a way it speaks about the progress of practice, the progress of our experience from worldly to spiritual to more spiritual than the spiritual, as it's put, or Bhikkhu Bodhi in his translation of the Connected Discourses uses the word carnal to represent samisa, which is quite, in a way, etymologically accurate in terms of the words, but I feel probably worldly is more, say, approachable, or more of a regular term that we would use rather than carnal. It's not, carnal isn't a word that comes up in conversation or is used very much even in Dhamma circles nowadays. So I think I'll, as I'm speaking, I'll tend to use the terms worldly, and then spiritual, and then more spiritual than the spiritual, as these three levels of, say, refinement, or the dimensions of attitude that can be cultivated with respect to this area. So that the Buddha is here talking about a way that the mind holds experience. And he talks about the four different levels of emotional tone. Firstly, with respect to joy or rapture, which the Pali for that is piti. The second of the areas he talks about is happiness or sukha. That also means contentment or ease. The third level is equanimity, upekkha, or serenity. And the fourth is that of deliverance, or freedom, which is a translation of the Pali word vimokkha. So the Buddha is essentially, it's a very analytical teaching. He's talking about three different levels of four different qualities. So if you're not into lists, then you've joined the wrong Dhamma talk. This is one of those list analyses that we have, rather than a kind of an anecdotal presentation, or using a lot of similes and metaphors and such like. But this is one of the teaching styles that the Buddha used, and I feel is very appropriate, very helpful in assisting us in, say, looking at the nature of mind, how it works, and also in particular how through that understanding and seeing how the mind works, that it can be guided towards attitudes and states that are liberated and are, say, inclining towards peace and freedom. Now, in the sutta itself, the quality of equanimity, he talks about, as you were chanting in your earlier part of the session today, there's an area where he talks about the equanimity. What is equanimity that is carnal, or which is worldly equanimity? What is spiritual equanimity, and what is equanimity that is more spiritual than the spiritual? So in that, as you saw in the chanting, as you were going along, it talked about equanimity, the first level equanimity, which is worldly, is equanimity, say, in the presence of the five chords of sensual pleasure. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. So it specifically mentions those five of the six senses. And then speaking about equanimity, which is spiritual, then he talks about the fourth jhana. And so again, not to presume that everybody here is totally familiar with Buddhist terminology and the Pali descriptions of jhana or dhyana, concentration, or chan in Chinese, or Zen Japanese. So this sutta, or this presentation the Buddha is giving, is somewhat related to the states of jhana, and you can tell that because of those 4 qualities that he referred to. Again, not trying to be too complicated, but when we speak of the 5 aspects of jhana, or the 5 attributes of jhana, then they are rapture, piti, sukha, happiness or ease, as the jhana develops, and then ekaggata, one-pointedness, and equanimity, upekkha. So that those qualities are all named as part of the aspects of jhana or concentration. The first 2, which he doesn't really mention in this sutta, are vitakka and vichara, which is sustained and applied thought. So the first level of jhana contains all those 5 qualities: sustained and applied thought, rapture, ease, and one-pointedness. And as the states of concentration get more and more refined, then vitakka and vichara, those thinking aspects, they fall away. So the second jhana has just piti and sukha and ekaggata, rapture and happiness or ease and one-pointedness. And then, the third jhana, if I'm remembering correctly, the piti, the rapture, falls away. So you just have sukha, ease or happiness, and one-pointedness. And then the fourth jhana, there is just one-pointedness, and it also specifies with that one-pointedness, there is this profound quality of equanimity, the serenity, this sort of total stillness of heart that is the quality of the fourth jhana. So again, not wishing to get too complicated, but so when he specifies in the sutta that you were reciting or chanting together, it says that equanimity, which is spiritual, he specifically talks about that the fourth jhana, and that's mentioned quite deliberately there. And then even though this teaching is given around the structure of the four jhanas, or they're incorporated, I would suggest that the investigation of this, equanimity that is worldly, equanimity that is spiritual, and equanimity that is more spiritual than the spiritual, or transcendent, is maybe a simpler way of expressing that. It's not just about jhana. So that was a long introduction to that one particular statement. So these teachings, it's not just about states of absorption, but rather, I would say, these levels and the development of equanimity, that quality of serenity of heart, the ability to find stillness in the middle of turbulence and activity, that is not just talking about concentration. It's not just talking about states of absorption, but this is a set of qualities and a process of development that we can use to map onto a broader scope of our spiritual training, our spiritual practice, rather than just the narrower field of concentration. So that's the way I'd like to approach this theme today. So hopefully that's you can follow all of that. And if I've completely lost you altogether already, then we can get to that in the question and answer period at the end. But suffice to say that what I'd like to focus on is how we can find stillness, or that quality of stability, serenity in the midst of the of our world, the sense world within our mind, and how those qualities of serenity or stillness can genuinely lead to a full ease and peace of heart and a full attunement to the reality of the way things are, which is the goal of Buddhist practice, that quality of enlightenment and spiritual fulfillment, a total peace, ease, and freedom. So one of the things that I'd like to do, even though we're, focusing on the Niramisa Sutta, it's very closely connected, I feel, to another sutta, a teaching in the middle length discourses called the exposition of the sixfold sense base, the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, which is sutta number 137 in the middle length discourses. And I don't know if Venerable Master Jiru, who I'm very happy to see on my screen today. If he has been focusing on this or has mentioned this already, but if this is an area of study or investigation, I think it's helpful to look at those two suttas kind of side by side. So this one, the Niramisa Sutta, which is Sutta number 11 in the Connected Discourses about Feeling, and then this Sutta number 137 in the Middle Length Discourses. So if you look in that sutta, the exposition of the sixfold sense base, then there's a certain place where, and I just happen to have the copy of the book right here, since I knew this was going to be the theme, where the Buddha says, there is, bhikkhus, equanimity that is diversified based on diversity, and there is equanimity that is unified based on unity. And then, and what bhikkhus is equanimity that is diversified based on diversity? There is equanimity regarding forms, sounds, odors, flavors, and tangibles. This bhikkhus is equanimity that is diversified based on diversity. So as you can tell, that matches up very, very closely with the worldly or the samisa kind of equanimity that is described in the Niramisa Sutta. And then in this particular teaching, he talks about recognizing a coarser or a more mundane or a more tangible level of experience or attitude, and letting go of that and focusing on a more refined level. And so then he says, and what bhikkhus is equanimity that is unified based on unity. And then he talks about different refined states of consciousness, and he says, here bhikkhus, by depending and relying on equanimity that is unified based on unity, abandon and surmount equanimity that is diversified based on diversity. It is thus this is abandoned. It is thus this is surmounted. Bhikkhus, by depending and relying on non-identification, abandon and surmount equanimity that is unified based on unity. It is thus this is abandoned. It is thus this is surmounted. So it was in reference to this that it was said, therein, by depending on this, abandon that. So that might sound even more difficult to follow or hard to penetrate, but I'd like to unpack that a little bit and say offer some of my own reflections on that area or that sequence of qualities. So when we talk about equanimity based upon diversity or multiplicity, that's the sense of bringing your attention to the present moment and establishing the quality of stillness in the midst of a lot of stuff, all in the middle of all these things, all these people on my screen, you know, the things outside my window in the garden on this afternoon in England, the events and activities in the monastery, the monastic community that I live with, you know, the feelings in my body, the other books piled up on my desk. So there's a multiplicity of things. So that quality, equanimity based on diversity, it's that equanimity or serenity, that stillness in the midst of great variety of things, seen, heard, smelt, tasted, and touched. So it's a worldly stillness, or a worldly rootedness or groundedness. So part of the mind is appreciative of that, say, the array of things, the world of things, the 10,000 things, as it's said in the Chinese tradition, if I dare quote words from your own your own tradition, but that multiplicity of the 10,000 things, that's finding that worldly equanimity, that samisa upekkha, is that and the ability to be still, to find that still center of the turning world, as T.S. Eliot put it, that there is that sense of there's a lot of things, the world is turning, but there is a possibility of being me being still in the middle of that. So there's a sense of I, who is this agent, this being, and it's surrounded by the world of things, but being me being still at the center of all of that. So that, I would say, is a way of reflecting upon this first level, or the samisa upekkha, or the worldly equanimity, or as it's put in the sutta on the exposition of the sixfold sense base, that that equanimity that is based upon diversity or multiplicity. So then in that, and the Buddha uses this phrase, abandoning this, develop that, by depending on this, abandon that. So then recognizing that there's a sense of me in the midst of all these things, me at the center of the turning world, then then there's a recognition of, there's a coarseness to that. There's a sense of division, or a lack of full attunement. So as we develop the practice, then we are refining that quality of attention. So we can, by depending on one-pointedness, or focusing the attention more closely in the present, we can, by depending on this, we abandon that. So letting go of that sense of multiplicity, the mind can focus on a single object. So first of all, in terms of spiritual practice, and as we most Buddhist traditions would say represent it, or use as a set of tools, you develop concentration or focus, collectedness of mind. You take a single object. So in that multiplicity of things, we take a single object, a mantra, or the feeling of the breath, the feeling of our footsteps as we walk back and forth along the ground. The mind is trained to focus on a single object of that multiplicity. We take one object, focus on that, and so then that's one kind of unity. So then abandoning the equanimity that's based on multiplicity, on diversity, we establish equanimity based on unity. There's the mind is focused. I am concentrating on my breath. I am repeating the mantra. I am focusing on my footsteps. So there's still a sense of I, the agent, the doer, and then the world, quote unquote, is simplified to a single object. So when we talk about absorption, then that's one kind of unity. So that equanimity that is based upon unity, there's a coherence, or a unified quality in the experiential field. The mind is just focusing on one thing. So there's a subject and an object in that. So it's still dualistic, it's still a dualistic form. But we would say this is what we talk about is the development of concentration, or samatha, calmness, samadhi, a full collectedness of mind. So that is one stage of the practice. And then we can say that as this is refined, then that one-pointedness, the mind gets more and more, say, focused steadily in the present moment, and that we can then let the quality of attention develop and broaden. And so rather than just being on one point that excludes everything else, so not just unity based on a single object like the breath and deliberately excluding everything else, then as the mind gets more focused, the attention gets more steady, then we find that there can be established an openness of attention. So Venerable Ajahn Sumedho, he would say that when the mind is absorbed or concentrated on a single object, we can think of that as the point which excludes. It's one-pointed, but it's a point which excludes a lot of the other 10,000 things. But as the quality of attention is refined and steadied, there's a greater stability of attention, a greater equanimity, really, then the attention can open so that it becomes one-pointed, but it's a point that includes. So yes, there is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, but the attention is not getting drawn into the content of the experiential field, but instead it is one-pointed on the process of experiencing. So there's still a one-pointedness and the attention can be quite broad, but there's the quality of unity is sustained through letting go of the content of experience and knowing the flow of experiencing. And when we talk about the development of insight meditation, the process of insight, it's in a way exactly this letting go of the content to know the process of experiencing. So we use reflections like on impermanence or change, reflections upon unsatisfactoriness of any individual sensory object, and then also the quality of not self, that whether we like something or dislike something, whether it's internal or external, whether it's technically or conventionally speaking mine or not mine, any sense of ownership is recognized as partial, as incomplete, as not, is necessarily not anything absolute. So in this area of this development of or refinement of equanimity, I would say you have both the concentration element and the insight element. They're both part of that equanimity based upon unity. And so it can be a unity that's a single point, like a mantra or the breath or a concentration object, or it can be the point which includes that openness of awareness, which the whole moment, the present moment is the object. But there's still within that that sense of a subject, an I that is aware of a that. That is unified. There's a coherence, an integration, a wholeness in the that, but there's a subject and there's an object. So it's still a dualistic paradigm. The mind is still, say, drawn into that subject-object duality and the dualistic state. So, and again, I should underscore the fact this is just the Ajahn Amaro reflections on this particular area. This is not the canonical or sort of classical commentary on the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. This is merely my own sort of reflections and exploring and way of working with these principles. But I do feel this is how things work, at least in my own practice, my own mind. So I thought this is what I share with you. But please don't, if you're looking for some kind of classical reference that says exactly the same things, you might be looking for a while. Just a warning on that. So then the third level, where it talks about the equanimity which is more spiritual than the spiritual, or as it's in Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation of the Bhikkhu Bodhi and Bhikkhu Nyanamoli, the translation of the middle-length discourse, he says that he uses the term non-identification. If you recall, the wording of that was bhikkhus, by depending and relying on non-identification, abandon and surmount the equanimity that is unified based on unity. It is thus this is abandoned, it's thus this is surmounted. So that equanimity that is unified, even if it's just a subject here and an object there, even if the object is say not disturbing, we're pointing to this extra layer of refinement. Now this term non-identification, the Pali is attammayata. Attammayata. It only appears a few times in the Pali Canon. This particular sutta is one of the places where you find it. But it's a term that Ajahn Buddhadasa, who's one of the most eminent and influential and highly regarded masters of Buddhism in Thailand in recent years, he said this is the final word of Buddhism. This is the ultimate Buddhist concept, is attammayata, and that if we are unfamiliar with this, I would suggest get familiar with it, because he spent the last couple of years of his life and his teaching career, most of his Dhamma talks were about this quality of attammayata, and he talked about it as the sort of the consummation of Buddhist wisdom, beyond emptiness, beyond suchness, that you have attammayata. So I thought I would again unpack this term a little bit, and how is this a refinement, or how does this embody that equanimity that is more spiritual than the spiritual, the Niramisa tara, the spiritual beyond the spiritual, or to say transcendent is probably a more convenient way, that transcendent quality of equanimity. So the word attammayata is made up of several parts. So the at the beginning is a negation, like my name is Amaro, Mara. Means not, Mara is death, so deathless is the meaning of my name. Also Amaravati, Maravati, the deathless realm. So the art of atamayata is not. Tan means that. Maya means is from to make. And ta at the end is like the English word, the English suffix ness. So not made of thatness, which is a really clumsy way of expressing the quality, but not made of thatness, so, or not thatness. So the origins of the words, they come from the, in a way, the understanding of how the physics of perception operated in the time of the Buddha. So, and Professor Richard Gombrich has a very helpful explanation of this that I've quoted in some of my writings. And so I'll borrow Richard Gombrich's words on this. He said that in the time of the Buddha, the way that it was understood that vision worked is that the eye would send out, say, using an example, so the eye would send out some kind of a beam. Here are my glasses. So the eye sends out a beam, and then it occupies the object, and then the beam becomes the energy that's sent out from the eye becomes consistent with the object. Tan mayata, made of that, or consisting of that, and then the beam returns to the eye, and that's the results in the experience of perceiving that particular object. So tanmayata is consisting of that. There's that going out, occupying, and in a way reifying an object, making it that, and then coming back with it's sort of returning with the package. It's picked up the signal, it's brought it back, and then the signal is registered within. So attamayata is not consisting of that, not going out, not creating the subject-object duality, not substantiating or reifying the experiential field. So attamayata, not consisting of that. So it's talking about a kind of awareness that is subjectless and objectless. So there's a letting go of, even if the mind has let go of the sense of an overt, I am watching, I am practicing, I am observing my mind, I am experiencing equanimity, even if those I ams are not apparent, there can still be that sense of independent agency, the knower or the watcher, the observer, that even if it's not articulated in a thought, there can still be that I am watching my mind, or there's an observer, a subject that's attending to an object. So atamayata, this equanimity that is based on atamayata, on non-identification in this translation of the Majjhima Nikaya, is indicating, or say, a way of talking about this subjectless, objectless awareness, which is the fulfillment of that the capacity for serenity or equanimity. It's like the perfection of equanimity comes with that subjectless, objectless awareness. Now, in this translation, it's rendered as non-identification. Ajahn Thanissaro, who's another eminent Theravada translator, he renders it as non-fashioning. And so there are different ways of, each of those eminent translators have their own reasoning behind how they render it. So certainly non-identification and non-fashioning are a lot less clunky than not made of thatness. But so non-identification refers to like the emptying out of the non-reifying of the subject, non-identification. Non-fashioning is more referring to the non-solidification or non-reification of the object. So not fashioning that, but it's I would say this quality of the equanimity that is more spiritual than the spiritual, or equanimity which is based upon non-identification. It's that complete letting go of any structuring of awareness, of creating any kind of an I or a person, a subject that is aware or knowing an object. And I feel that this is where the fulfillment of insight meditation and the development of Buddhist wisdom is one of the areas where this is articulated most simply and most beautifully. If but it's the kind of teaching that you have to take those words, those concepts, to take them to heart, reflect on them, use them to examine, explore your own mind in the practice of meditation, and get a feeling, a direct knowledge or a direct feeling, a direct sense of what those words refer to in our own practice. What is that quality of subjectless, objectless awareness when the mind is awake and aware of this reality, but there isn't an eye that's watching that. There isn't a subject and an object. It's also interesting, and again, this is probably a little bit contentious, but knowing, having had a little bit of connection with Advaita Vedanta and practitioners of Advaita Vedanta in the past, I would say, again, with another, not exactly a spoiler alert, but a possible heresy warning, that I would say that Atamayata is a Pali version of the Sanskrit Advaita. Advaita. A means not, dva means two, ita is the practice of, or that the way of, or the attitude of. So Advaita Vedanta is not to, the practice of not toing. So, and that two, the two-ness, the dva of Advaita is, as I understand it, principally the two of subject and object, like not two. And also in the verses of on the faith mind of Master Sengsan, and forgive my bad Chinese pronunciation, the verses of the Sin Sin Ming, where he says, simply say not two. And I would say that also one can reflect upon that not two, meaning not subject and object. And that I would, again, presumptuously suggest that in those verses of the third patriarch of the Chan lineage, that's referring to this same letting go of subject and object, not two. There's not subject, not an object, and then also not two in terms of the objects either, that sense of unification and the equanimity, that total serenity of heart that comes from that refinement of attitude, that refinement of wisdom, that is, there's the same, say in a way, liberated awareness, awakened awareness, that is being referred to in the verses of the faith mind. So in these teachings, then I feel we can probably the practices of samatha, of concentration, of the development of vipassana, insight. These are probably familiar to most of the 45 people logged on today. 45 people that are logged on today. So I presume that this is somewhat familiar territory for most of you. But I feel that in particular, this set of teachings about equanimity, as it's represented in the Niramisa Sutta and also in the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, that in particular, it's this most refined area is something that will be of great benefit to explore and to reflect upon, because many of us have practiced meditation for many years. Again, I'm not reading anybody's mind, but just by statistically, many of us practice meditation for many years, and we can be very sincere and develop quite a lot of skills, but that can still be that me watching my mind, me doing the practice, me making some progress, me making no progress, me listening to a Dhamma talk. And that sense of subject and object can be heavily lent upon, can be a very powerful and heavy influence in the mind's perceptions, but it's so common, it's so ordinary to us. It's rather like the force of gravity. It's there all the time, so we don't notice it. Just like, who wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, gravity"? I don't, because it's there all. It's not news. It's there all the time, unless you're floating around in the International Space Station. So this bringing attention to that subject-object division and seeing that doesn't have to be believed in or held onto or reified, but using this principle of atamayata, exploring that letting go of both not just letting go of that, but letting go of this. If that is let go of, then what does that say about this? That if there's no that, there is no that, then it radically changes the mind's attitude towards this. That there's a letting go of both of object and subject. There's the emptiness of both subject and object, and realizing that even talking in terms of subject and object is just a convenient way of speaking. Just like we talk in terms of time. In Missouri, it's now 1 o'clock in the afternoon. No, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning. Here it's 1 minute before 5 in the afternoon. There's 6 hours different. What time is it? In Missouri, it's 11 in the morning. In southern England, it's 5 in the afternoon. So what's the time? So we use the conventions of time and knowing, oh, okay, I've been speaking for 40 minutes already, so it's probably time to get onto the question period. But we use those conventions, 11 o'clock, 5 o'clock, for convenience. But there isn't really an 11 o'clock. It's just a human agreement based on the spinning of the planet, this particular part of the Milky Way. That's all. It's just an agreement by certain beings living on this particular sphere at this particular time of evolution. So the conventions of subject and object are also just like agreeing on a time. These are mental constructions, and that if that quality of wisdom, this say the equanimity that is based upon atamayata, on non-identification, non-fashioning, if that is genuinely established, then that also helps the heart to let go of time, to let go of location, to let go of even of cause and effect. Because if that timeless quality of Dharma is recognized, if it's seen that Dhamma is a kaliko, is timeless, then how would cause and effect work in any substantial way? If time is an empty convention, and Dharma is in its essence timeless, how can cause and effect be substantial, be real? That also the patterns of cause and effect, as they are experienced, as they are known, these are also say subjective experiences, conditioned experiences that are given a false reality, a false solidity by the ignorant attitudes of the mind. So in terms of using these teachings and developing the practice, I feel that particularly in the work or the efforts towards insight meditation, looking closely at that feeling of I the experiencer, I the practitioner, I the one who's knowing this moment, turning the attention onto that feeling of I-ness and me-ness and my-ness, and using the power of wise reflection, investigation to let go of that. And so there are various different practices that can be used. We can use say inquiry, like raising a question, like who is it that's practicing? Does this moment have an owner? There's this, the mind can say, I'm hearing this Dhamma talk. What is this? What is the I that is claiming to be hearing? There is hearing, but what does that I look like? Is it female? Is it male? Is it old? Is it young? Where is it? Is it on the screen? Is it in Augusta, Missouri? Is it in Hertfordshire, England? Where is it? So that we can use those qualities of wise reflection, questioning, to challenge the feelings of I and me and mine, I the experiencer, I the doer, I the owner of this personal story. We can use wise reflection, or even just rather than a question, we can make a statement in meditation when the mind is quite focused and still, just to highlight that feeling of subjectivity, just thinking the word I, with nothing extra, just I, not even I am experiencing or what is the I, just I, just thinking the word I, and noticing in the light of wisdom, in the light of that quality of awareness, how weird that word is. What something in the heart knows the referent of the word I. It's like, what is that? Why does that sound so weird? Or our own name that's familiar to us, that we have, we're using every day, people use to refer to us. When you bring the mind to a quality of stillness and quietness, to just, with no commentary, nothing about you, just drop your name into the silence of the mind. And again, notice how weird our own name can be. Like, what the heck is that? Amaro. Huh? What's that referring to? So these everyday assumptions, like the force of gravity, the feeling of me, the experiencer, me, the doer, me who's got to solve this problem, me who is a woman, who's a man, who's old, who's young, who's living here, living there, has this or that profession, that to turn the attention onto that and to just highlight the ridiculous or the subjective, the conditioned nature of that I-making and mind-making. And in that, then the letting go of those familiar structures, there is a kind of, I think I would call it a skillful weirdness, like a, huh? What? That skillful weirdness is really useful. It's weird in respect to our habitual patterns of attitude and thinking, but to the heart, if you notice kind of behind that weirdness or that sort of, I'm not sure, when I look in the mirror, I want to know who that is. It's like, but then when we look in the mirror and then there's something in the heart that goes, what is that? And what has that got to do with anything real, really? Huh. So that then, along with that feeling of disorientation or weirdness, there's a relief, there's the wisdom of the heart, the natural, say, awakened awareness of the heart that says, of course. How could the fundamental reality of all things be old or young or tall or short or female or male or have a nationality or an age or an address? How could that really apply? Oh, and so then behind that sense of disorientation or weirdness, which is sort of reflex of the ego structures, there's a feeling of spaciousness and relief, and that quality of serenity, that ease of equanimity, that is, as in this teaching, the Buddha points out as the most refined, or the culmination of the potential for ease and freedom and peace. So I've spoken for about 45 minutes or so, and I'd like to open things up for some questions. So I offer these thoughts for consideration. I hope some of what I have said has been useful. Anything that has been helpful, then please take it and use it. Anything that's not helpful, then either leave it aside or ask some questions. A1.
Thank you, Ajahn, so much for your words on a very profound topic. To simplify things, because of so many people being in the room here, and also on Facebook Live, I don't have a count of how many 100 people are there. But to make things simple, if people would like to ask questions, if you would type it into the chat box, and Francesca will receive them, and then she will relay those questions. I know that it's a little intimidating sometimes also to ask questions, so maybe typing it in will make it a little bit easier as well in a large group like this. But I would like to start with one question that I have on this subject, which has to do with how as a psychotherapist, looking at how the mind works, to understand that this very subtle quality of equanimity is defined in so many different ways in the Buddhist texts. Sometimes it appears to be like a neutrality. At other times, maybe it's been translated as indifferent. I'm not a big fan of that one, but also in the Brahmavihara, it's used in a different way as well. So Upekkha has so many different kind of refined meanings, I'm wondering if you could say something about how this equanimity terminology is kind of used in so many different ways.
Hey, good question. I actually have a book in the works, a little book on the subject called "Serenity is the Final Word." Yeah, it's true, because sometimes upekkha is used by the Buddha. I couldn't tell you exactly where, to mean a kind of indifference, like I don't care, and I think it's a rare usage, but it can be used in that sense. And but as a general translation for upekkha, indifference is missing the point, and even equanimity is I feel is emotionally flat, and that upekkha, if we take the principal quality of it as defined as one of the Brahmaviharas, the most, say, refined of the four divine abidings, the sublime abidings, they're all great brightnesses of the heart, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, above, beyond, around, and everywhere. It's a great radiance of the heart. It's not just a flatness or even a coolness. There's a brightness to it. It's interesting that upekkha, when it comes in the lists, it's the 10th of the 10 paramitas in the Pali tradition. It's the 4th of the 4 Brahmaviharas. It's the 7th of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And in the Buddha's lists, at least in the Pali, usually goes from the coarsest to the most refined. So when upekkha is on any of those lists, it is the final word. That's why I use that as the title for this little booklet. It's the most refined of the Brahmaviharas. It's the most refined of the factors of enlightenment. It's the most refined of the 10 paramitas. So that it's an extremely significant quality, and I would say, as with many words, you have to look at the context within which it's used, because if the Buddha is using it to mean indifference, then okay, that's what he means there. He doesn't, in that instance, it doesn't mean a great brightness. It means not caring, as a very worldly and not exalted state of mind. One of the qualities of it in terms of the Brahmaviharas, and that's and the relationship of that to wisdom, is that I often say that loving kindness ripens in equanimity. So the perfection of loving kindness comes with upekkha, or serenity, so that whereas for loving kindness, that quality of everything belongs, everything, no matter how turbulent or colorful or shocking or painful or exciting, every experience is part of the natural order. So that radical acceptance is part of the development of metta, but I would say that that aspect of it is fulfilled in upekkha, in that profound serenity, that sense of everything. How could everything not belong? And so that quality of total acceptance, spaciousness of heart, that abundant, exalted, immeasurable, that limitless, boundless quality of upekkha. It's like a all-accommodating, spacious quality, and so that's one of the aspects of upekkha, I think, that is interesting to reflect upon. So it's a loving kindness ripens in serenity, or metta ripens in upekkha. Another of one of the aspects of it, I haven't been able to track down, but I have heard it said that the Buddha points out that of the conditioned states of mind, upekkha is the closest to nibbana. So of conditioned states of mind, then upekkha is the closest to the peace of nibbana. It's still a conditioned state. It begins and it ends. It's conditioned, but it's the closest representation or the simulacrum on the conditioned plane of nibbana. And so also the four sublime abidings, the Brahmaviharas, they're known as liberations. They are kinds of vimutti. They're liberations, but they're still conditioned states. So they're a kind of a bridge between the conditioned and the awakening to the unconditioned, and then upekkha or serenity, equanimity, is the most refined of those. So I feel that's where that comment of and whether the Buddha actually said that or someone assumed the Buddha said that, I'm not sure. If anyone has ever come across that or knows where to track that down, I'd be appreciative. But it's in terms of experience, yeah, that the Brahmaviharas are conditioned states, but they are known as liberations, and so they're extremely wholesome. They are in a way, the mature emotions, or that the natural disposition in terms of emotion of the enlightened heart. So that an arahant would, on the emotional plane, the emotional life of an arahant is constituted by loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and serenity. Those are according to circumstances and particular situations. But that would also echo that same sense that upekkha is close to the quality of the peace of nibbana, the peace that comes from total liberation of the heart. I think looking at the context in which a word is used is important. Like, is upekkha being talked about as the 10th of the 10 paramitas? Is it being talked about as an attitude of a farmer towards their crops failing? Is it being talked about as one of the four Brahmaviharas? You look at the context, and then you can then get a sense of how it's being used, because the Buddha he liked to use words, language that was familiar to people, and so that often a single word has a variety of meanings, like the word sankhara. It can mean the body, it can mean any conditioned thing, it can mean a thought, it can mean a word. It has a very broad range of meanings. So you have to look at the context within which a word is used to really get a sense of what the meaning is intended for it in that situation.
Thank you, Ajahn. Brian is a little under the weather, so I'm going to have Josh has a question, and he raised his hand. Josh, can you hear me? Unmute yourself.
Okay. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it wasn't allowed at first. Thanks for the talk, Ajahn. I wanted to make a comment, maybe question about Atayamata at the end here. But as far as your question, what I was thinking of is maybe it's a big stretch, but before the Buddha went into Parinibbana, he went all the way up to, eighth jhana, and then came back down and went out of it, but then went back up to fourth jhana, and then Parinibbana, right? With that notion of equanimity or one-pointedness of fourth jhana, I wonder maybe the correlations there. But I really wanted to just thank you for this long talk of yours that I listened to, a podcast on The Island, the book The Island, all about the goal, and how I loved how it was structured, because there was readings from the entire book, but then there was also discussions and questions and answers. And I was listening to this. I was driving out to Maba before all this COVID started and auditing courses out there. I found it really helpful, and how I just kind of dug into that and just kind of turned over every stone, and would come back later with references that came up and included those. So I'm very grateful for that too. In the lineage of Ajahn Chah, I wanted to relate, if I'm just really briefly, kind of a teaching that I benefited of yours, of this.
Josh,
Yeah?
I hate to stop you, but we need a question.
Oh, yeah.
If you
Okay.
have no question,
Good point.
we've got several.
Yes. Just to wrap that real quick, I'll just say I benefited much from this. Is that so? Question, and then so. I found that really helpful. So I have to skip the story, but so Atayamata, I've also heard it, if I'm getting this right, unconcoctability. And I thought that was a very interesting way to put it too. And if I'm getting this right too, whatever we think the truth is always other than that.
Yes.
And maybe my question would just be to kind of wrap up the stuff that I said, and if kind of addressing the accuracy or expanding on those points. Thanks again.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, unconcoctability, I think that's Ajahn Santikaro's translation of Atamayata. And he was Ajahn Buddhadasa's translator for quite a number of years. And they worked together. They did a lot of person-to-person collaboration. And Ajahn Buddhadasa had quite a bit of English as well. So he would, and I was there visiting Suonmok when he was giving talks on this. And he would sometimes stop Santikaro and say, no, not that. It should be like this. So unconcoctability, that is, I think, former Ajahn Santikaro's translation. So yeah, all of those are relevant. So Ajahn Buddhadasa would also say, this is the final divorce or of the mind from the conditioned realm. It's like, I ain't gonna mess with you no more, was Santikaro's more kind of Midwestern rendering. I ain't gonna mess with you no more. And it's that kind of a tone of there's no more of this unconcoctability. So it's one of those terms you can't really find a perfect English word for it, but that's why I was saying how it's in a way most important to get a feel, like a felt sense of what this quality is in our own practice, in our own hearts, and then let the word follow the reality as it's known, rather than trying to pin down the perfect word. Somebody gave me a copy of Jean-Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness a few weeks ago, and a really substantial tome. And the way that there's this effort to try and pin everything into the reality, into the words, I keep getting this feeling of starting from the wrong place, guys. I realize that can be a bit of an inflated perception, but I feel one of the great blessings of Buddhist practice is you're starting with the experience and letting the words match the experience or evoke that as best they can, but you can't pin that down. So the passage you're quoting, the Pali is yena hi manyanti tatatang hoti anyatati. Whatever you conceive it to be, the reality is necessarily other than that. So again, not to belittle Jean-Paul Sartre and his efforts and the other good European philosophers, but to me, that's an extraordinarily potent and useful principle. Whatever you conceive it to be, the reality is necessarily other than that. That you can't put three-dimensional tea into a drawing of a two-dimensional drawing of a teacup. The reality's got too many dimensions to fit into concept and language. So that's one of the reasons why I say with Atamayata, you're letting go of time, identity, location, causality, language, time, even number. Those are conditioned constructions that we give more reality and substantiality to than they really possess. So that simple phrase of whatever you conceive it to be, the truth is always other than that. It doesn't mean that you've guessed the wrong answer to the puzzle. No, it's like saying words can't do it. You can't put three-dimensional tea into the drawing of a teacup. It won't go. It's got too many dimensions. That's why it's not that if you just had a better drawing, it would work. No, it's the concept hasn't got enough dimensions. So that in that level of realization or practice, it's letting the heart abide in that three-dimensional or more higher dimensional reality, and not trying to represent the fundamental reality just in concept and word, which is one of the reasons why the Buddha was quite happy to not try and describe the nature of ultimate reality, but spend 99% of his time pointing to the pathway to realize it for the individual. rather than trying to describe the nature of the goal or the qualities of the goal. Just he put 99% of his attention on the pathway to the realization of that, and then it's like how to make a teacup rather than how to draw the perfect teacup, how to actually make a three-dimensional teacup that can contain the tea. So.
Thank you, Ajahn. Thank you, Josh, for the question. We have several other questions, and a lot of them are focusing on the mechanics, the suggestions of types of meditation, how to sustain and move on to the next levels and function in the world. Do you have any suggestions along the lines of Satipatthana meditation, any specific types of meditation that would help us advance into these different realms?
Well, there's various different approaches. I think what I was saying at the end, and also what Josh was quoting about, this practices of Ajahn Chah, of asking the questions, is that so or so? That both in formal meditation, but also the more we develop it in formal meditation, the more that can be applied in the flow of everyday activity, is to use that kind of questioning. You know, who is meditating? Does this moment have an owner? Is there, who is here to progress or to not progress? It's not that the effort is not being made or direction is not being given, but it's flagging that I-making and mind-making, the ahankara, mamankara habits, to flag those, to illuminate those. And it's as soon as that is known, it's like shining the light on those habits. It's like you're slowing the film down so you can see how the conjurer did the trick. It's like that, intrinsically seeing how the eye is, that there's an eye being formed here. Oh, that's a formation, that's a presumption. Aha! So that you're, by using that kind of reflection, questioning, who is walking, who's asking this question, it's shining a light on those I-making and mind-making habits, and then the effect of shining that light, because it's not just like a mantra that you're repeating just to who am I, who's walking, who's thinking. It's not a simple repetition. It's the more it's a genuine question, then the more that breaks up the habits of I-making and mind-making. And then what that does is, it, rather than disabling our life from attunement or effectiveness in the world, like that non-attachment or non-identification, non-fashioning, it doesn't mean we sort of suddenly freeze in the middle of the sidewalk and I'm suddenly stopped existing, and I need someone to come along and start moving my limbs again. That's not the way it works at all. It's rather that when the I-making and mind-making is recognized and let go of, then the system of this life functions in a far more attuned and effective way. Like if you take the life of the Buddha as an example, after the Buddha's enlightenment, he did not become ineffective. He became extraordinarily creative and impactful in his world. The effect of the enlightenment was not, and that profound equanimity, that profound, say, letting go of the illusions of identity. I'm not sort of comparing myself or ourselves to the Buddha, but if we take that as a model, that a total enlightenment manifested as extraordinary creativity and energy and effectiveness in doing what could be done to help make the world a better place. That was the result of the Buddha's non-attachment. So in terms of our life in the world, then off the cushion, outside the Dhamma hall, to be sustaining those kind of questioning and recognizing where in the middle of a conversation, who is it that's got to fix this problem? Who is feeling excited? Who is feeling uncomfortable? Why is this so satisfying, or what's there to be afraid of? So you're using that kind of inquiry, examining. You develop that as a reflex, in a way, your manner of processing the field of experience moment by moment, as you're looking at your phone, as you're sitting in a meeting, as you're climbing into a car, And that kind of a process, one of the ways to develop that is if you have a period of time at the beginning of a day, just to establish that as a clear conscious intention. During the course of the day, this will be a way of reflecting on conversations, decision making, liking, disliking, comfort, discomfort, success, failure, gain, loss. Is my intention when the mind makes a judgment of good, bad, pleasant, painful. Whenever the mind makes a judgment, it'll be noticed, and there'll be the question: who does this belong to? Who is succeeding? Who's failing? Who delights in being praised? Who's upset by being criticized? Who owns this feeling? So you're setting that as a program, if you like, at the beginning of the day. And then, of course, you can get to 3 in the afternoon and go, I totally lost it. I've been completely carried away by the whole thing all day long. Okay, well, here we are. It's only 3 o'clock. Okay, start again and reestablish that. And so I found that a very helpful way. So you actually consciously make it a program. And it's not to be behaving in weird or confusing ways, or like if someone says, pass me the orange, can you pass the orange juice? And if you say there's nobody here, or there isn't anyone here to pass the orange juice, that's going to develop into a domestic incident. I would suspect, unless you've got another Buddhist meditator across the table. But if it's if it becomes sort of clunky or just systematic or too drawn into technicalities, then it's a sign that you're working with it in an unskillful way. It's using this kind of questioning and exploring, but the result of it is, in a way, more naturalness. It's like in sports or in music. As soon as if you're playing a piece of music, as soon as you think, oh, this is going really well, I'm playing very well today, you're toast, right? I mean, anyone who's tried to sing or join in with a group, or like, oh, I haven't forgotten any of the words today. Oops, there they go. Or like a sports player, as soon as they start to think about what they're doing and they're then trying to calculate it or force it, then you trip over your own feet. So to quote, I think Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, don't think, Luke, use the Force. Like, so it's not to negate thinking. Thinking has its place, but if we put the thought of the practice or the deliberateness of the practice or the kind of structures of the practice as the priority, then we'll trip over our own feet. But if it's just like developing that, say, a mode of response, whereby we're dealing with conversations, with our activities, with our experience of the world, we are then just recognizing that I-making and mind-making, and through that recognition, then seeing how it's muted or it falls away or it loses its strength. But then, in a way, the most important part of this practice is then it having been interrupted, that I-making and mind-making, that interrupted for a moment. What's that like? In that moment, what is the nature of the heart free of that grasping, that identification? How is it? Because if we're just sort of applying the practice but not noticing the results of it, it's like working like crazy but never using the money that you're earning by going to work. Yeah. But part of the work is the joy of working, but part of it is to get paid and to use the money for useful things. So noticing the result, I mean, it's a very worldly, it's a samisa example perhaps, but noticing the results. So when there is a moment, even if it's just a second or two, of that letting go of I-making and mind-making, where it's just hearing, feeling, meditating, working, talking, it's just that, and there's a letting go of the subject-object duality. Notice what the quality is like. How is life in that moment? And then to let that speak for itself. You don't have to even give it any verbal description or conceptual description. Just feel the nature of that, and the heart is free of that kind of grasping, letting go of time, identity, location, of subject-object. How is it? Oh, very simple, very, very peaceful, very pleasant, and there's nothing missing. There's nothing extra. it's again, there's nothing to add, nothing to get rid of. There's a sense of wholeness in that moment. And the thinking mind can then jump on that and say, oh, this is great. Now I've already got it. I just have to keep doing this and then I'll be fine. Yes. But then the mind has jumped on a thought and got bored into that thought. And a me who's got to keep doing something to get what it wants. So, but then the more that in that moment, oh, here's the mind jumping on a condition and creating another self, then letting go of that, letting go of that, letting go of that. So these kind of practices, that even though they might sound extremely refined or subtle, they can be exercised in the ordinary flow of the rough and tumble of our daily lives, dealing with queues at the airport, watching the news on the TV or the computer feed or whatever, having a difference of opinion with your significant other or your children or your parents or your co-workers, then these are applicable. And in particular, along with that kind of questioning or reflecting, the partner to that is body awareness, that we can relate to Dhamma practice or these kind of principles. It can get very heady, and so in a way, the body and mindfulness of the body is it's sort of the partner to that kind of inquiry or that wise reflection, because the body is absolutely guaranteed 100% to be here in the present moment. It can't wander off into the past or the future. It can't. The body doesn't abstract, right? No one gets so distracted that their arm just sort of dissolves and floats away. At least not outside of the Marvel cinematic universe. Bodies can sort of dissolve or bits drift off, but in science fiction movies and fantasies. But in our actual practical living world, the body is always absolutely present here now. And so that's the guaranteed way to bring the attention to the present. And also the emotional habits are reflected in the feelings of the body, that's irritation, excitement, fear, the depression, jealousy. Emotional tone of all different kinds is manifested through the body. So developing body awareness, there can be that a mindfulness and recognition of the emotional tone of the moment, and you're not trying to get rid of what we don't like or get hold of what we do like, but just being attuning the awareness to the body in the present is that's a guaranteed way to help say integrate or really literally to ground this kind of a practice, because this body is our piece of the ground. That's our piece of the planet. Maybe the last thing to mention in terms of practices and how there's such a strong conditioning of personalizing everything, that Ajahn Sumedho's most recent book is called Don't Take Your Life Personally. And I often say, those of you who listen to my Dhamma talks, I've said numerous times, I think he could have just printed the title and had the pages of the book blank. Just the title of the book, kind of, it could be a very, very short book. Don't take your life personally, full stop. That's the teaching. Because we do, and that a source of so much difficulty and discord in our lives is taking it all personally. Our anger, our fear, our desire, our opinions, our emotional states, love and hate and longing and so forth. It is so personal, and we can feel like as if I created anger in the universe, that I am angry, I'm an angry person, or I'm a jealous person, or I'm a lustful person, as if we created that it didn't exist before we came along, rather than this is an attribute of the natural order. A human being can feel fear and anger and lust and greed and jealousy and selfishness. Yeah, that's part of the package. It's in the user agreement, it's there. It's by being born, the mind is subject to those states from time to time. We didn't create it. It doesn't mean to say that anger is wholesome and beautiful and good. No, if it's acted on, it's destructive and painful for everyone, but it's not a personal thing. We can say, I am angry, but the wisdom teaching will say, well, no, in this moment, there's the experience of anger. It's not a person. It doesn't belong to a person. So in terms of getting a perspective on that personalizing habit, there's a way of reflecting that I like to use, and I encourage to help get a perspective, is just to say that which knows the person isn't a person. Yeah, that which knows the masculinity, femininity, nationality, occupation, opinion, all the things that we think of as who and what we are, that which knows the feminine isn't female, I would say. That which knows the male isn't male. That which knows Americanness isn't American. That which knows Britishness isn't British. I realize this might be also, heresy warning. And the philosophical amongst us might say, but actually, Ajahn, isn't that what makes us most completely a person? Well, again, you could make a case for that, but I would say the way we normally think of a person, I am a woman, I am a man, I am British, I am American, I am a monk, I am a teacher or whatever. All those I ams, the habitual way that we personalize and think of who and what we are, that which is aware of them, that knowing quality, that vichar, that awakened awareness of the heart, that doesn't have a gender, doesn't have an age, doesn't have a location. When Ajahn Chah was asked the question, how old are you? Do you live here at Wat Pah Pong all the time at his monastery? He said, I have no age, and I don't, there's nowhere that I live. Oh. And it's like, how could he say that? But in that moment, in that particular dialogue, which I believe was accurately reported, that he's speaking from the place of Dharma, the mind of which is Dharma, the mind which is that ultimate reality, that the Dharma doesn't have an age. It's not located anywhere. Age doesn't apply, location doesn't apply. And so that, and he went on to say, if you have an age, if you live somewhere, then there's attachment. If there's attachment, then there's suffering. So don't attach to anything, don't identify with such things, and then there won't be any suffering. So I feel that's a very profound exchange. He was known as an arahant, as a totally enlightened being. He can't tell a lie. So when he says, I don't have an age, it's like when the Buddha is asked, are you a human being? He said, no. He's got there's a human body born from human parents, King Suddhodana Mahamaya, his mother. But when the Brahmin Dona said, are you a deva? Are you a god? Are you a yaka? Are you a human being? He said, no. He said, that whereby you could know me as a human being, that's been completely abandoned, completely let go of. And then the Brahmin Dona asked him, so forgive me if I'm being impolite, but what are you? And then the Buddha said, Buddhoti mang dhareta, know me as one who is awake, one who is awakened, or that which is awake. So that's one of the reasons why we use the word Buddha to refer to the great being, is that I believe, from my understanding, that particular exchange with the Brahmin called Dona. If you want to look up the reference, it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Fours, Sutta number 36. So you can find I quote it in the Island, that book on Nibbana that I think Josh was referring to, handily named on the screen. It's one of the advantages of Zoom is you can remember people's names. People are conventionally labeled in the corner. So that a Buddha cannot tell a lie when he's asked, are you a human being? Manusosi, and he said no. That whereby you could know me or define the Tathagata as a human being, that's been cut off at the root, made like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions for existence, and rendered incapable of arising in the future. The Tathagata is liberated from being reckoned in terms of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. He is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So that I feel those are helpful ways, helpful teachings to reflect upon, that we define ourselves, or again, maybe going back to Don's question about psychotherapy, on a certain level, we need to own the conditions that form our life, of being female, being male, being or non-gender specific, being of a nationality, or having a particularly family dynamic. There needs to be a way that those are recognized and honored. But the Buddhist perspective, or the wisdom perspective, I would say, is that, yeah, but those actualities need to be seen in the context of the more profound reality of Dharma. Yes, there are these conditions that make up this particular life. On the conventional level, my parents were Tom and Pat Horner. That's who my mother and father were. But in terms of Dhamma, then that's not, the biological parents are not the source of your reality. The Dharma itself is that reality. And so that those kind of reflections, and using a little theme like that, or that which knows the person isn't a person, or the mind is Dhamma, it's not a person. Just to keep dropping that in, those kind of reflections, the mind or the chitta is Dharma, it's not a person. Not as out of inflation or exaggerating any kind of attainment, but just that isn't that the case, that Dhamma is nature, nature is Dhamma. So everything that constitutes this body and mind is an attribute of nature. It's Dhamma jati, it's Dhamma. So the mind really is Dhamma. That's not a fanciful notion. That's the fabric of the mind. So I realize it's now 5:45 on our time, and I suspect this is close to the completion of the session for Maba. And
it is. Just before we go, can I kind of summarize what you've said with respect to using this in our lives? Set an intention, use a trigger, which can be a Vedana or feeling tone, and then notice the result. And it all boils down to don't take it all personally.
That's the brief way of saying it, but why use 10 words when you can use 1,000? Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn, so much for coming. I'd like to have one moment in the event that someone out at Mabo would like to say hello to you or to say something. I don't know if Master is still there. Would you, Master, like to say anything before the end of our program today?
Yeah, I thought this is a good starting, connected to Ajahn Amaro, and I think this is not the only talk that Ajahn Amaro will given to our community. The coming days that we hope the connection is the start. At least from time to time, we will come together to sharing the Dhamma, especially your insight of the Dhamma. Thank you again, Ajahn Amaro. And thank you all the listeners in the Zoom and in Face and in our mobile Zoom. Thanks for participating.
Thank you.
John, do you have a moment to give us a dedication of merit at the end for us all?
Certainly. English or Pali?
Either one is fine, whatever you would like.
Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life, may they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dharma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you all for coming and joining us today from wherever you are, whatever time zone, designation. I wish you all well from our friends here at MABA, and thank you again, Ajahn, for joining us, and we wish you all to have a wonderful day. Thank you all.
Have a good evening, Ajahn.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.